Hello YouTube. Recently I was replaying Skyrim again, as you do when there hasn't been a mainline entry in the series for almost 13 years. Todd, it hurts. Please. Anyway, when I was replaying Skyrim for probably the 400th time, I came across this line by Arngeir.
Do not let your easy mastery of the voice tempt you into the arrogance of power. That has been the downfall of many Dragonborn before you.
I was intrigued by this line, and I wondered whether in the lore we would be able to find Dragonborns that had either fallen down or outright became evil, and why they became evil. So I decided to give you this bonus video before my video on bugs and insects of Tamriel likely releases next week. So let's roll the intro and start with the video. Alright, so to properly do this video we need to make two definitions. The first being, what do we see as a fallen or evil Dragonborn? The second, who actually is a Dragonborn? Because that question is more complicated than you think and some people get violent in discussions about it. So, just in case you don't know the basics, very oversimplified, a Dragonborn is someone who has been blessed by Akatosh with the soul or blood of a dragon. Therefore, these individuals have an easy time learning the dragon language, they have an easier time learning shouts, and they can absorb the soul and knowledge of dragons that they slay. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, wrong. The exact nature of a Dragonborn is highly debated and discussed in the community, and there are lots of caveats and theories on it. Now, in order for this video not to spiral into a 40-minute video of what makes someone a Dragonborn and just 10 minutes of actual evil Dragonborn content, I will direct you to another Elder Scrolls YouTuber, Dareloth, who actually made that 40-minute What Makes a Dragonborn video. It's an excellent video and I recommend watching it as it gives a nice overview of the subject, and not gonna lie, he's one of my personal favorite Elder Scrolls YouTubers, so be sure to go to his video, which is in the description after finishing this video, of course. Now, for this video I think what's important is that we limit ourselves to whether or not the people of Tamriel perceive the character as a Dragonborn, or whether history makes the character out to be one. For example, while it's not super clear whether all the Septims of the Imperial Septim family were Dragonborn, we know that the people of Tamriel saw them as having the dragon blood. So if, let's say, one of the Septims turned evil, foreshadowing, the people of Tamriel would see them as an evil Dragonborn. With me so far? Good, because then we can leave the more metaphysical side of that discussion with Dareloth and we can proceed with this video. Alright, so the second thing we need to discuss for the video is the concept of being evil or being fallen. Two concepts that are highly subjective, because what makes someone evil? That's really just a point of perspective. Very simple example, to an Imperial supporter, Ulfric Stormcloak seems like a wicked terrorist trying to destabilize the Empire and give the Thalmor the opportunity to overrun the remaining human states. Meanwhile, to his Stormcloak supporter, Ulfric is the savior who finally wants to stand up to the evil Empire in the pocket of the Thalmor. See what I mean? It's really up to perspective here when talking about evil. So the categorization that I'm going to use for fallen Dragonborns will be an individual that either fell from their destiny to defeat a very black and white one-dimensional evil. So for example, Alduin in Skyrim is a pretty one-dimensionally evil character, at least to the characters inhabiting the world. So if the last Dragonborn were to, let's say, not complete the main quest, abandon their destiny and simply murder everyone for power or just for fun, then that would be a fallen Dragonborn. And an evil Dragonborn I will categorize as someone who deliberately brought harm to both allies and enemies for their own power or ambitions or pleasure. The allies and enemies line here is really important, as there's a lot of Dragonborn Emperors, even those whom you would call morally good from a human perspective, that were hated and seen as evil by many in the Empire who wish to be independent and not part of the Empire. Is it a perfect definition? No, definitely not, but I need something workable. So this video doesn't become a 100 hours long video, since the definition of evil is something that philosophers haven't figured out yet, as far as I'm aware. And I am simply a guy behind the laptop making Elder Scrolls lore videos, so probably not really my area of expertise. So, let's now talk about evil or fallen Dragonborns. For one, due to Arngeir's statement saying that the hunger for power has been the downfall of many Dragonborns before us, we can reasonably speculate that there are quite a few unnamed Dragonborns in Tamriel's history, or forgotten Dragonborns of Tamriel's history, who ended up falling to evil and were then forgotten. Just as we know that before the whole Dragonborn Emperor tradition started with Alessian in the First Era, there were quite a few ancient Dragonborn heroes of humanity, some of whom we can meet in Sovngarde during Skyrim's main questline, where some of these heroes in the Great Hall of Valor say that the dragon blood was also their birthright during their lifetime. So these ancient Dragonborn heroes were mostly forgotten, as back then the dragon blood did not really carry the same weight with the people of Tamriel as it did after Alessia started the covenant with Akatosh. So these heroes were never properly recorded in history. The same likely goes for the aforementioned villains who were forgotten to history. That said, we do have some non-forgotten Dragonborns who for all terms and purposes fall in one or both of our categories. And I would like to start with probably one of the most black and white evils on this list, Tiber Septim. Now, like I said, there's a bit of a discussion on whether or not all Septims were in fact Dragonborn, but she was the legitimate daughter of the Dragonborn Emperor Pelagius Septim II, and thus was at least seen by the people of Tamriel as a Dragonborn. Now, Potema was one of 4 children of Emperor Pelagius Septim II, and she was not the eldest, so she did not stand to inherit the throne. Instead, she was married off to the much older King of Solitude, leading her to become Queen of the then Kingdom of Solitude by marriage. In that role, she manipulated her husband into disinheriting his children from previous marriages and put their newly born son Uriel up as his heir. This succeeded, and when her aging husband died quickly after their son was born, Potema became the de facto Queen of Solitude until her son came of age. In this position, she formed a diplomatic coalition of kingdoms of High Rock, Skyrim's then kingdoms, and some of Morrowind's local rulers against the rule of her eldest brother, who had become emperor after the death of their father. And when he died, she then started a political smear campaign against his eldest daughter, Kintera II, accusing her of being a bastard simply so that her son Uriel would be able to claim the Ruby Throne instead. This was the catalyst for the War of the Red Diamond. A video on that war is in the description for more information, by the way. But in short, during this war, Potema and her son had started a civil war in the Empire. They captured the young Empress and likely had her killed in captivity. After a long war, her son Uriel, whom she had crowned Emperor Uriel Septim III, was captured by her brothers. After Uriel's capture and subsequent death, Potema then retreated to Solitude, where she was killed after a 10-year siege. It's during this siege that Potema showed her from her most evil side, as she would use mass necromancy to raise armies. She summoned Daedra, and she turned Solitude into a quote-unquote land of death, with eventually all her subjects being killed and raised back up until she had surrounded herself with undead slaves. Now, if that's not black and white evil, I don't really know what is. Now, while we could realistically also place Uriel III on this list, her son, I am kinda hesitant because from most of the history that we know, it implied that he was in general just a well-meaning puppet manipulated by his mother. As when he ruled things seemed to be generally okay until his mother came to interfere, so if anything we could say that he's more of a fallen Dragonborn. But on the other hand, it said that he died in a prison cart when a mob of peasants burned him alive, so maybe he wasn't that great either and hated by the peasantry, although that hate again could have also been directed at things that his mother did in his name. So I think fallen, as in fallen from the destiny to be your own man and ruler, applies more here, but hey, let me know your own perspective on that in the comments. I think a similar case to Uriel III are some of the emperors in the Alessian Empire, like Amiel and Gorius. We don't know an awful lot about these emperors in terms of what they did during their rule, as they ruled more than 3,000 years before the events of Skyrim and 2,000 years before the Elder Scrolls Online, if not longer. But we know that they did many evil deeds, or at least they were carried out in their names, as they were essentially puppet emperors whose puppet masters were the Alessian Order, which, very oversimplified, was a religious order that worshipped the One, which essentially is a more all-encompassing version of Akatosh. And the Alessian Order as an organization was also very human supremacist, as they hated all non-human races with intensity, especially elves and minotaurs it seems. It was under their rule that the Allied kingdoms, which had helped free the humans and establish the Empire, suffered very bad pogroms and were eventually destroyed or banished from the Empire. In addition, minotaurs, which were first seen as valuable inhabitants of the Empire, were degraded to second-class citizens and later also driven out of settlements and into the wilds by Imperial forces. This all happened during the rule of these Dragonborn Emperors, who were the Order's puppets, and in some cases apparently part of the Alessian Order. So I think it's pretty fair to put them in the fallen category, or even evil. You see how inconsistent I am with my own definitions? That really shows how bad the definitions are, but hey, we're working with them for this video. Anyway, considering they betrayed and killed former allies and did not live up to their destiny, I think they do count for the video in at least one of the categories. Alright, so next up let's talk about someone who you probably already thought of when you saw this video, Miraak. Now, Miraak is considered to be the first true Dragonborn, and also the first one who fell away from their destiny to become a hero. He was born long, maybe even more than 1,000 years before Alessian and her heir started the tradition of Dragonborn Emperors, in a time when being Dragonborn had a bit less status than it does in the games that we play. During this time in the Meretic era, before recorded time, Miraak was a dragon priest of the dragon-worshipping dragon cult, and it's said that he served as a leader of the cult for a while. What's interesting here is that because he led the dragon cult and served the dragons, many would already see him as evil, so even if he hadn't done what he eventually ended up doing, he would, to some people, already qualify as evil, because they see the dragon cult as evil. But Miraak was a bit of a special case, as he ended up betraying the dragon cult in order to gain more power for himself. You see, Miraak in his day was hungry for power and knowledge, and as happens with most mortals hunting for those specific two things, he was led to become a follower for the Daedric prince Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of knowledge. It's a bit unclear how all of this happened, but the way I really like to interpret it, even though we're not completely sure whether that's the way it happened, is that while Miraak was a Dragonborn, he was at first unaware that he was a Dragonborn. I mean, he was the first known Dragonborn, so maybe nobody even knew what a Dragonborn was back then. And then Hermaeus Mora told him of the secrets hiding in his blood and that he could absorb dragon souls. Although it's also possible that he was already aware of his special blood and that is why he had become leader of the dragon cult in the first place, so that's also a possibility, but I like the idea of him not being aware and Hermaeus Mora spilling the beans. Either way, Miraak ended up trusting Hermaeus Mora, becoming his champion and learning many forbidden arts from the Daedric prince, including a shout which would dominate dragons to his will. Miraak became a fearsome leader with dominated dragons at his beck and call. He killed many dragons in his time, and it's said that he ruled with an iron fist. Eventually, however, he would be defeated, first by Volok the Jailer, a dragon priest in service of the dragons who managed to defeat Miraak and almost killed him before he was saved by Hermaeus Mora, and then of course he was killed thousands of years later by us during the Dragonborn DLC. Now, while I would say that his actions would already kind of place him on this list, there's a theory out there which places him even more firmly on this list. Because while he could already be categorized as evil, I think we can also categorize him as a fallen Dragonborn. You see, people think that Miraak was blessed by Akatosh in his day with the dragon blood in order to defeat Alduin. That was his ultimate destiny before Hermaeus Mora corrupted him. In fact, we know that the humans of Tamriel during the Dragon War, when Miraak was also at the height of his power, begged him to come and help them in their struggle against the dragons in Alduin, but Miraak refused, falling away from this theorized destiny. This theory then also states that because of his betrayal of humanity, Parthenex eventually joined humanity in their fight, as he states to have turned on Alduin when he saw Alduin turn away from his destiny, which according to this theory happened after Miraak had refused to help take him down before everything went to shit, essentially. So, because of Miraak's betrayal, we had Parthenex who ended up teaching humanity the voice, a trade-off that I'm actually pretty happy with, because I think it's more interesting. Anyway. Let's now talk about the two final evil Dragonborns, both controversial figures and both I will cover in a simplified manner as both definitely deserve their own videos. The first one that I want to talk about is Mankar Camoran. You see, Mankar Camoran is very much his own beast, but let's try to give a simplified explanation of why I put him on this list. You see, it's very much implied that Mankar Camoran, one of the antagonists of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion and leader of the Mythic Dawn, was not a Dragonborn and was not even born a High Elf. Rather, it's implied that he used strange rituals involving Mehrunes Dagon's power, and maybe with the use of one of his artifacts, that Mankar Camoran was able to change his Nimic, which is essentially a metaphysical code of who an individual is. I'd almost compare it to DNA, or a blueprint of life. As I explained in my video on Daedric Nimics, they are most important for the Daedra, but it's implied that mortals may also have Nimics, and that Mankar Camoran, through Dagonic arts, changed his Nimic in such a way that he not only changed from being a Bosmer to being a High Elf, but that he also suddenly could quote-unquote speak fire in a different tongue, and that after that point he could wear the Amulet of Kings, as we see happen during Oblivion's questline, which has been interpreted as that he could suddenly shout as the Dragonborns and Dragon can, and that his wearing the Amulet of Kings during Oblivion proves that he indeed turned himself into a Dragonborn this way, or at least something equivalent without the blessing of Akatosh, but through manipulating his own being. Now, that was the controversial part. I don't really think I need to explain why he would be seen as evil, at least by most people on Tamriel. because he, among other things, plunged Tamriel into chaos by having the Emperor and all his heirs assassinated by his organization, the Mythic Dawn, and he unleashed the Oblivion Crisis, and he turned his own followers into miserable slaves in the so-called Paradise Realm, and he tried to destroy essentially all of the mortal plane. That's simplified, very, very simplified. But it also gets across why he is generally seen as evil by all those except who worship Dagon and share his vision of the universe. Anyway, the last pick for this list is honestly more of an honorable mention, as he will be most divisive and most controversial. Tiber Septim, first emperor of the Septim Empire and later ascended as Talos, hero god of mankind. I will one day dedicate a full video to Tiber Septim, as he's so shrouded in mystery and conjecture that whatever I say here will likely be insufficient unless I make the whole video about him. So I suppose whether or not he was evil kinda depends on the perspective, like I said at the beginning. Because from the perspective of High Elves, Tiber Septim is most definitely evil, as he used a gigantic death robot, the Numidium, to murder hundreds of thousands of High Elves and force them into submission, murdering many innocent already surrendered Khajiit and likely Bosmer in the process as well. In addition, it's highly implied that he killed many of his closest allies out of his own lust for power, and that he betrays close friends and allies to fuel the death robot Numidium with their powers. He was power hungry and vindictive and betrayed those who cared about him, such as Berenzia, and he committed a lot of cruelties. So could he be placed on this list? Very much. Does he deserve his own video to explain some of the deeper nuances? Most definitely, but in order to not make the entire video about him, I just give you the bullet points here, just so you know that he's a bit more nuanced, and some people would definitely not place him on an evil list, and some people would definitely do that. So, just to make this video complete, here he is. Anyway, that's about all I can say about the fallen or evil Dragonborns, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you managed to learn something new about the Elder Scrolls lore today. And if you did, why not return for the next Elder Scrolls lore video on Tamriel's bugs and insects releasing next week? Would really appreciate it. And when you're at it, don't forget to check out Daryl's video on what it means to be Dragonborn, and I'll also add his more than 40-minute video analyzing Mankar Camoran and his belief system and his transformation as well. Can really recommend both. Plus, he's a good dude, so just give him some love. That being said, all there's left for me to do is to vocally thank my top Patreon supporters: Mr. Bernardo Binda, His Soul, Gabriel Binda, Doji, K-Legend M, King Chris, Lance Vandertooth, Volkir of Argonia, RP the Beast, Devin Mattingly, Rakai, and Sword of Bushido. They and all the others on screen make my videos possible, and for that I am very grateful. That said, I'll see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Probably next week. Bye bye.